Every day around the world, working dogs, the unsung heroes of the military, contract, and police forces, risk their lives for the safety of humans. But what happens to them when they're no longer able to serve? Join us as we explore the heartwarming and sometimes heartbreaking stories of these remarkable dogs and their journey after retirement. Get ready to be inspired and moved, so stay tuned. You're listening to Starlight Pet Talk, a podcast for pet parents who want the best pet care advice from cat experts, dog trainers, veterinarians, and other top pet professionals who will help you live your very best life with your pets. We also share inspiring rescue and adoption stories from people who've taken their love of pets to the next level by getting involved in animal welfare. My name is Amy Castro, and I'm the founder and president of Starlight Outreach and Rescue and a columnist for Pet Age magazine. I've rescued thousands of animals and helped people just like you find the right pet for their family. My mission is to help pet parents learn all the ways that they can care for, live with, and even have fun with their pets, so they can live their very best lives and their pets can too. My guest today is Kristen Maurer, co-founder and president of Mission Canine Rescue, a nonprofit organization located right here in the Houston area where we are. Mission Canine Rescue's purpose is to rescue, reunite, rehome, rehabilitate, and repair retired working dogs who basically have spent their lives serving us. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you being here. As a former military person myself, although I did not work with working dogs, I was a public affairs officer, but always admired the handlers and the animals and the things that they do and the situations that they put themselves in. So what inspired you to start this organization?
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. What inspired me, I had found out I was working my own dog privately. I was working her as a narcotics detection dog. And in that, I was training with officers around the state of Texas. And I would go to Dallas each weekend to train with these officers. And one of the times they'd asked me if I would pick up a military dog that was coming in from Kuwait to Houston, and it needed to get to a handler. So, I said, absolutely, I'll do that. And I picked up the dog, and that's when I found out that it costs a lot of money to get these dogs back from overseas. And once the dog retired, if the handler was able to adopt the dog at that time, then it was up to the handler to pay for those costs. And so that's kind of where everything started, was reuniting dogs and handlers. And it just started on this small scale. But that was back in 2013, at the end of 2013. And then in 2014, right out of the gate, there was this big military program where they had utilized, right after 9/11, they had utilized private contract companies to help train military dogs and then send them with handlers because they needed dogs quickly on the ground. And and they didn't have enough dogs trained. So they started these two programs. And the programs were not as successful as they had hoped. So they were shutting down both programs right as we came out of the gate. So in January of 2014, I started getting calls from the Marine Corps. My dog is in North Carolina, and I have to get this dog. And I live in California and Colorado. And so for the first part of 2014, I was flying back and forth, going and getting dogs and then getting them to their handlers and then flying back and doing it again. And I was in the air more than I was on the ground. So everything that we done was really, there wasn't a great plan. At the end of 2014, we get a call from somebody in Afghanistan. She said, we have 10 dogs retiring and they have no place to go. Can you take them and help find them homes? And we had no idea where we were going to put them. We didn't know what we were going to do with them. We were really blessed. We found a boarding facility out in Sugar Land that said, yeah, you can bring them here. So we brought the dogs in, we got them all vetted. And then within a week of the first call, I got a call from a contract company in Kuwait with 10 more dogs that needed to come to us. It was just, and nobody talked to each other. It just happened all at the same time. And they said, can you take them? And we said, sure. And unfortunately, that boarding facility was full. And so we got a boarding facility out near Intercontinental Airport for those 10. And so they landed. And for the first several weeks, I'm driving back and forth from Sugar Land to Intercontinental, finding veterinarians that I could get these dogs vetted so that we could get them tested and find them homes. And then once we did all of that and we got all the applications, my business partner, Louisa, and she was a vet tech in the Army, but she was working full time as a vet tech. But on the weekends, she and I would travel across the nation, dropping these dogs off to their new homes. It was insane, but it really just kept beginning. I mean, it started with the reunions and then went on to pulling them in. And so 2014 was just a trial and error year, and it was insane.
That's crazy. So just so people are clear, these people that are reaching out to you, they're trying to rehome these dogs. There's an urgency to that. What happens to these dogs that are overseas if they don't have a place like Mission Canine Rescue that will take them in and get them back here?
Well, at that time, especially, they were either being left behind or euthanized at a rapid rate. A lot has changed in the 10 years with a lot of awareness. Just us fundraising, a lot of awareness came, and we got to work with the Secretary of State on what to do with the dogs that were at least government contracts. So the government contract dogs are now pretty protected, but they have adoption programs, but they also, most of the handlers will get the dogs. If the handlers don't get the dogs, then they'll call us. We get calls from those contract companies. But there are other contract companies that aren't contracted with the government, and they work for private businesses doing, overseas and doing these jobs, or still work for private contractors, but they work the embassies or they do something like that. And those dogs, if they don't have a handler to go to it, they will still just reach out to us. If we weren't there, then that could be a problem for the dogs. So we have filled a huge need.
Yeah, so. I know I was reading somewhere that, and it was as of 2021, that you had already kind of rescued 1,100 or more dogs.
Yeah, that's rescuing and reuniting all together.
Right.
But yeah, we're at 14 or 1,500, and we've reunited as of today, because we reunited a dog and a handler today.
That's great.
In Norfolk, Virginia, came from Rota, Spain, and we flew the handler out to get the dog. But we're at 671 reunions as of
incredible.
today.
I remember reading articles about, especially military working dog handlers, like desperately trying to get their dogs back, and the government at one point, basically refusing to make that happen. And so when you said a lot has changed, even from my perspective as a person in the public, that's a pretty significant change in the last few years.
It definitely has. And I mean, if you think about it, in Vietnam, the handlers had to leave their dogs behind. They turned them over to the Vietnamese. They euthanized them. No handler, got their dog. And we've worked really closely with a lot of Vietnam handlers. We love these guys, and they're traumatized to this day from leaving their dogs in a war zone back behind. So if you think from that to where we are today, there's regulations in place where the military does have to, even if the military does not leave them in war zones anymore, and hasn't, since Vietnam. Right. So that hadn't changed. But what they were doing is they were bringing the dog back to their duty station, which is a non-combat zone, but in Germany, Guam, Japan, something like that. Mm-hmm. And they were leaving them there. And they were telling the handler, if you want your dog, you need to get your dog from these places. And so we definitely filled that need. But then we also went in and spoke in front of Congress, and we worked with congressmen and senators on different bills. And we got laws passed that the military had to bring the dogs back, CONUS, stateside, continental United States. And we're real proud of those, because we would work on one, and the first was in 2014, and it passed. It was bipartisan. It was in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2016, I think, is when we finally got everything written, and it passed. And then the military kind of found a loophole in it, and so we went back and we rewrote it again, and they found another loophole. And then what we found was happening, and it took years to find this out, because you can't get a lot of information, but it took years to find out that the law was not matching the DOD, the Department of Defense's regulations. Mm-hmm. So the military doesn't go by the law, they go by the Department of Defense's regulations. And so there was this disconnect, no matter how many times we tried, saying, hey, no, United States Navy, you need to bring your dog back stateside, or Air Force or whatever. And then wherever it is, we'll pick it up from there. So let's say the dog ends up like today in Norfolk and the handler is in Phoenix. Well, we'll help make that part happen. So, but they were still not doing it for a lot of years. In 2021, we had some, it's just crazy stuff. It was always such a battle. We found out that there were 6 Marine dogs in Japan that needed to get back to the States to their handlers. Well, that would cost us $6,000 a dog. And we were going, we don't have that kind of money to do right at this time. And what they were starting to do, instead of euthanizing the dogs, they would just adopt them out to local servicemen and women that are serving over in that area. But that's not fair to the handlers who want their dogs. So we reached out to a gentleman that he's a retired lieutenant colonel, and he always said, if it's a big need and it's something you really, really need, don't just make it something small, but if it's something that's desperate, you call me. And I have a friend that's still a colonel in the Marine Corps, and he'll help. So I called this guy and I said, Mike, is 6 dogs stuck in Japan not getting back to their handlers a big enough need? And he said, that's a big enough need. So he called this Marine Corps colonel, and that colonel head started rolling, and that colonel made it happen. He got those 6 dogs, because we said, we don't care where they come in. Yeah. We'll get them, and we'll get them to their handlers. We just need them to come in. So they got all 6 to come in to San Diego, and we flew to San Diego. We rented a van, and we drove, my business partner Luis and I drove those dogs across the country. The last one ended up in North Carolina. So we drove from San Diego to North Carolina, dropping off dogs along the way to their handlers. But when that happened, that Marine Corps colonel who made that happen, heads started rolling so badly, he was able to get the DOD regs kind of started and people looking. And in 2022, they passed. So now the military has to bring the dogs back, CONUS, and then it's up to the handler or us, or they'll reach out to us to get the dog to them from there. So it's been a crazy ride. That's the reunion side. Now the adoption side and the rescue side is a whole different ball game. So
that's actually what I was going to ask about next. For the ones that don't have a handler that's chomping at the bit or able to take the dog back. Because I'm envisioning. Originally, when I was thinking retired dogs, I'm thinking about, old, decrepit, 14-year-old dogs. But they retire these dogs a lot younger in many instances for a variety of reasons, right?
Sure, some do. It just depends. Now the Department of State, I think and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty positive their rule is that the dog has to retire by 6 or 7, which is great because it gives the dog a retirement. But some companies keep them, and the military will keep them. As long as they're working, they're going to keep them working. So we get both. We get old dogs. We get some younger dogs. But we just got, we didn't get them yet. We just paid for a big group of 5 retired mine detection dogs out of Bosnia. And it's a private contract company. And those will be landing here in Houston next week. So, Wednesday. And
what will happen to those when they get back here?
Well, we'll get them medically checked out. If they need to be neutered or spayed, we'll take care of that. Any medical needs they have, just make sure that they're healthy and ready to go. We do a complete blood panel on them. We do x-rays on them. We want to know their intake when they come to us. And then that way we have a baseline. And when we adopt them out, then the adopter knows what they have coming to them. We can tell them, this dog has this, this, and this, and what they're prepared to do, to go into the home, because it's a lot of ask. I mean, especially some of these dogs are older, and it's a labor of love for someone to adopt them. The way we feel is they've worked their entire life to protect mankind. It's our turn to give back to them.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So that's what we
and it's so interesting with military. We obviously have have had a draft in the past in the United States. I went into the military willingly and pretty much knew what I was getting myself into. But these poor animals that serve in the military or serve, with a contractor or even police dogs, they're oftentimes basically born and raised for that job, and they don't really have
Correct.
a choice. I mean,
They
they
don't have
do
a
it
choice.
well because they're bred to do it well. But I think it's awesome, and what you said about them retiring them younger, so they actually can, they have that working period, but then they have a period of life where they can just enjoy life, and that's they deserve that for after all they've done.
They do. And I think a common misconception, and it was mine too, so I get it, but I've learned over the years that everybody's like, oh, these dogs, they're bred to work and they want to work. They do. And they do. It because for them it's a game. They love going out and finding the ball. They love going out and finding the Kong, which is what they're doing when they're looking for a bomb or they're looking for drugs. They're not looking for a bomb or drugs. They're looking for their toy that has been teased with them for so long. So all they want is that toy, and they get to play with it for 5 minutes and it's taken away. So it becomes an obsession looking for the toy. So everybody's like, oh yeah, no, they love this. And they do. They love the hunt. They have a good time. But what they don't love, and what I've learned over the years, what they don't love is living in a kennel in a 5x5 run away from their person. They don't love that. I'm telling you right now, they don't love it. It's stressful to them. And we know it because we had kennels, and we do have some kennels, because it's not just like with people. It's not 100% across the board. Some do better in a kennel setting. I will say that are more institutionalized, I call it. But so we do have kennels, but we originally just had kennels, and they were stressing themselves out and injuring themselves in our kennels. So what we did is that's when at our facility, we created 30 by 30 yards for each dog so that the dogs have a space to run, and they're next to another dog, and they may not know how to be around another dog because they never really have been. So all of a sudden they're going, I don't know if I like you, I don't know if I don't, but they're not going to fight at the fence because they have all this space. So they'll run to the fence and then run and play and and the next thing you know, you look up and they're all peaceful and happy laying around. And then at night we bring them in and we crate them at night. We put them in crates because we're trying to get them ready to get into a home. And if somebody were to go to work or something, then they can crate their dog and know their dog's going to be safe in a crate. And so these dogs sleep in crates, and some people think that that's good or bad. I'm telling you, they love it. They go in after a day out in the yard all day long, and they go into the crate and they go right to sleep. And they're air conditioned and heated kennels. We never let our dogs freeze or get too hot in the summers. Last summer was so hot. They'd go out in the morning and they'd go into their crates, and the guys would walk them all day, long. And these dogs would be dragging them back to the crates. No, there's one in the air conditioning. It was hot. So it's just things we've learned over the years. And so for me, and then I've learned, custom and border patrol dogs. So I'm going to give you that example. And this one broke my heart the most. And that was that we got a custom and border patrol dog, and he was awesome. And he was so happy to be at our place. You could just tell he was like, this is great. And so I started asking the CBP people about the dogs. And they said the sad part is that they're living in these kennels. And because the way CBP is, because they are constantly changing shifts. It's not like a 2-shift thing with Customs and Border Patrol. There's people going all night long, and all the dogs live in the kennels. So these dogs are living in a kennel, and somebody comes in to bring a dog and put it up, and somebody else comes in to pick up a dog and take it out. The dogs get up and they're barking and they go crazy. And this happens all night long. So these dogs for years never rest. I mean, never get a break. And that one broke my heart the most. But they get to us, and some of them don't want to leave because they're like, oh, this is great. Like today, such a beautiful day in Houston, and they're all out in their yards. And I can promise you, it's not chaotic. You can drive past our facility right now and you won't hear a dog barking because they're all just laying out in the yards. Now they do, when we take them out in the mornings, they're barking. They feed them in the mornings, they're barking. And once they settle down, they just settle down. And in the evenings, when they take them back in and feed them, they're kind of chaotic then. But for the most part, they have a pretty peaceful existence at our place. But our goal is that we're just a stepping stone. So we're going to help decompress them to a point. And then our goal is to then know as much about them as we can, so we can find them a home, a true home to retire on a couch. So or a dog bed,
Do you, other than the fact that they, that they've kind of lived in in that isolating experience or spent a lot of time isolated in, in their working lives. Are there any other common issues that, let's say somebody was going to consider adopting a former working dog? Are there, obviously each animal's individual, but are there common issues that these animals come back from service with?
A lot of them have a high prey drive because that's what has been ingrained in them. So they may not do well with small animals or, cats. Not all of them. We have some that we've tested with cats and have gone into a cat home and done just fine. So like you said, not across the board, but probably more likely than not. My retired working dog would never allow a cat in the house, but he's great with my little dogs. He's fine. So it just depends on the dog, and we have to get to know him in that regard. One thing we do with this whole obsession, so I touched on it earlier, how they train is, so they're looking for their toy, this elusive toy that they have this high drive to find. That's their favorite thing, and they get to play with it for a few minutes, then the toy's taken away. And then once they find something again, well, you get your toy. Well, that's a lot of dang work for your toy. So the first thing we do when they come into our care is we give them a whole bunch of toys. And we're just like, have at it, because you're never going to have to search for this again. You're just going to get it for free from here on out. And so they some of that drive, we can take some of that drive away. And some of them, no. I mean, I had one retired, he was a mine detection dog out of Afghanistan, and he had been pretty tortured over there. He was a little bit of a hot mess, but I loved him. And all my other dogs were just so respectful of him because they just knew Robbie was just a little off, but he never got over that obsession. And so if anyone else had a toy, he'd run and go get their Kongs. And I have pictures of him with like 10 Kongs on his dog bed, and he's just sitting there with his tongue hanging out, and just with his Kongs everywhere. But a lot of them, even my retired police canine at the same time, I had him at the same time, he would let Robbie take his Kong because he was like, I'm done with that. I don't need that anymore. You can have it. So it just depends on the dog, like you said. But that's a big obsession. I think there's a misconception that they're all completely potty trained when they get, because, but we try to work on that with the crate training. That's another part of them going into a crate, is teaching them how to be in a home and getting them ready for a home setting. As far as contract working dogs, their obedience isn't perfect because the contract world is a little different than the military. Their goal is to get as many out as possible to make money. So all they're training these dogs on is how to find bombs or drugs or whatever it is they're doing with the dog. They're not really working on obedience as much. So some of the dogs need some obedience, but they're also smart. That's the other thing that's across the board true. They're so smart that they learn extremely quickly, and they figure out really quickly how to be respectful and how to do most of the obedience. We are starting a program where we have a former handler who's going to come several days a week and work on obedience with some of the dogs, so that they'll have that basic obedience when they go into a home. So that will help. But the people who adopt from us, most of them come back for more when their dog passes. They're ready for others. I think once you've had one, it's really hard not to have one.
So the people become just as obsessed with the dogs as the dogs do with their toys.
Yes. I always say they're like potato chips. You just can't just have one, because you know what they did. You know what they've been through. You know what their job was. And so it's kind of an honor to be able to give back to them a little bit. That's how we feel, and that's how our adopters feel. As far as our adoption process, it's pretty strict. We have a huge online application, and then we have 2 adoption coordinators who ask all of the questions and find out if they're a fit for the dog, because a lot of times, it's a lot of ask for somebody. They need to be prepared, and our adoption coordinators are very honest that they don't sugarcoat things just to get dogs adopted, because our goal is once that dog goes, we don't want them to come back. We want to know about them, and we want to know how they're doing, and we want them to be happy, but we want them to stay in their forever home. Once they talk to the adoption coordinator and they've been approved through them, then they go to the manager of our facility, and the manager of our facility, along with our kennel guys, come up with 4 or 5 dogs that would be a good fit for them, and then they can choose from those dogs. And that's how we do it, so that we can make sure, let's say you're an active hiker and you certainly don't want a dog that's just retired and wants to be on a couch, or on a dog bed. You want a dog that's a little more active. So we try to really hone the dog and what they do to the person, and as much as we can.
Yeah, we stress that even in our pet applications, it's all about fit. I mean, and we stress that in so many episodes of this podcast, is that there's no point in getting an animal that doesn't fit your lifestyle, because then you're going to be wanting to give it back to me. And
absolutely. And I love the animal, but I don't want it back. And that's just it. For their sake, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's 100%. And I think that's why we don't put who's up for adoption on our page. People ask us that all the time. Why are the dogs not on your page? Because, in 10 years, we've figured out what works best for our organization and our dogs. And one of them is that, because we find that somebody sees a dog and, it has this cute picture, because we always make the pictures cute. Yeah. And they're going, oh my gosh, that dog's going to work perfectly in my home. And even though we write in the thing, this dog is not good with small animals, it's not good with this, but I'm good with dogs, and I have chickens and rabbits and bunnies and cats. And we're going, no. And so it just slows down the process, we feel. Yeah. So, because they'll argue to death, and we're like, no, I promise you, this is not your dog. Another thing that's very strict with us, when I say very strict, I should say there are certain dogs that we know, we get little labs and we're like, oh my gosh, the sweetest thing. Then we do kind of lighten up on our rules, But for like a Belgian Malinois, we don't adopt them out to anyone with children under the age of 13. And the reason why is because it's not because of the kids. It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with this dog still has a high prey drive, has a high ball drive, toy drive. And let's say you have a toddler and you have a stuffed animal or a ball in their hand, and this dog is going for the toy, not the toddler, but something could get hurt in the process, and we just don't want that for anybody involved. So that's just kind of our policy. But we do have some big marshmallow dogs that end up not caring about the ball and the Kong, and we know for a fact that they would be amazing in a full family home. So we have made exceptions to our rules. And so we try to do that with our dogs too. It's an individual basis, because just like people, they're individuals, and everyone is a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's such a true point. I wish I had the ability, because I don't think that would fly in just regular pet dog rescue, to say, hey, we've got some dogs, if you want one, apply, and then we'll find one that matches you. But you're so right. I literally just posted, or actually reposted, a video clip this morning of a podcast episode where I said something along the lines of, please read the descriptions we put out there. It's, we always try to put animals in the best possible light, but when we say no kids, no cats, or whatever, believe us. Do not call me. Yeah. Do not put in an application when you have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, because it ain't going to happen. It's like,
we're not trying to upset you.
Exactly.
This is not a personal affront to you at all. This has to do with this dog.
Exactly.
And that's it. I know we've had people, we've denied people, and it has nothing to do with them. We're like, if I were you, I would go to a shelter and you will be a perfect adopter. This is not a personal affront to you at all. This is just, our dogs are not going to match your lifestyle, and we know this. And trust me, we've made mistakes. That's how we know. We've had dogs that we've had to run and go get that we adopted out in, say, I don't know, Tennessee. And the dog didn't work out. And they're like, you need to come get your dog tomorrow. And we're scrambling, trying to figure out how are we going to get to Tennessee by tomorrow, So we're really, really careful about our adopters. That's important to us.
Yeah, and you're right. We learn this from experience as to, what is the best fit for ever, and I told a guy the other day that was very offended by it. He still, even when I tried to explain to him the reasons why we weren't moving forward with an adoption, it was basically an angry response of, I'm doing you a favor by taking this animal for a good, for a good family. And it's like, I said, I guarantee you could walk into just about any shelter in the area and find another animal just like this one. These are our parameters, these are our rules, and we created them so that we could sleep at night with the decisions that we've made. And maybe we're wrong, but I've got to be able to live with it. So
we've had those same people, the same. you just blew it because you just missed the best adopter ever. We've had those, and we're like, okay, well, that's a risk we have to take. I'm sorry. And
Exactly.
and we never want to offend anybody, but at the end of the day, we're going to do what is right for the dogs in our care. We have to. It's our job for their care. So that's our goal. And I'll tell you, we've had some amazing adopters because of it. We have an adoption family, and they stay in touch, and they send pictures, and because they know how invested we are. And, in just the travel arrangements for the dogs coming from Bosnia, it's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and then once they get here, our guys are so good with them, and they fall in love with each and every dog that we need to do right by these dogs because we've committed to them. And I think that's any rescue. I think that's the way any rescue feels,
Yeah, you do feel really responsible for their futures as much as we can control them. I mean, we know we can't control everything, but hey, do you have any, and I know you've basically given several examples of animals being brought back, but are there any particular stories that you would say is to kind of end on a positive note with a happy ending story?
Well, one of my biggest happy endings is the fact that things have come so far in the 10 years. These dogs had no representation when we started. I mean, no one even knew what a contract working dog was. I mean, when I went and spoke in front of Congress the first time about military dogs and getting them brought back, I went to these guys and said, but there's another dog, and this dog is getting less care than the military dogs. So, I mean, they need our help. And at that time, everybody's going, we don't know what you're talking about, So the leaps and bounds that have been made for these working dogs in the past 10 years, it has been huge. And I'm very proud that we've been a big part of it. As far as any particular reunion, I don't know that there is one that's any better than another, because these guys and girls that get their dog that they served with, I think back when we were still in Afghanistan and it was still extremely dangerous. I think those were the most touching, because these guys were on the front lines with their dogs on a daily basis and risking their lives every day. And then all of a sudden they're separated. The handler goes and either gets out of the military or he goes and does something else in the military. I mean, you know how that works. Yeah. And then the dog goes on to another handler, and they're separated, and they're separated for several years. And that's still the case today. The same thing happens today. But to watch them be reunited, that's the pinnacle. That's where no matter how many tears you've cried, how many hours you've worked in your life at 80 hours a week, how many fights you've had with family members, they're like, we want to see you. And you're like, I'm sorry, I'm busy. And it's all worth it when you see these dogs reunite with these handlers. My favorite ones, I always tell the handler, I'm like, do whatever you did, make whatever noise you made when you were working with them, because the handlers are trained to make girly noises and high-pitched sounds to get the dog excited. So do whatever it is, and and that dog's gonna be excited. And I think my favorite, it was Jacob and Attila in Chicago, and it's been, gosh, how many years has he had him? Attila's still alive too, which is awesome. 5-6 years, I think. And I told Jacob that, I said, just make whatever sounds you made when you worked with Attila. And they had been separated, I think, a couple of years at that point. Well, we weren't prepared. We had the news there. We had everybody there. And I'm holding him and I'm talking the news. And he starts making the sound down around the corner. And Attila starts dragging me. The giant German Shepherd is dragging me like I'm a rag doll across the airport, going towards that sound. Wow. And so much so, then Jacob comes around the corner, and it's still just, oh God, it still gets me. And I let go of the leash, because he ran so fast to that guy, because he knew exactly who he was the moment he heard that sound. He's like, that's Jacob, and I'm going home. And it was that moment that, it's moments like those, and they happen over and over. Another guy with his dog, and the dog's name was CC, he did the same thing. It's all over the internet, because it was a little chocolate lab, and he was like, CC, baby! And the dog just goes bananas when he sees, and And those are the moments you see that you know it's all worth it. Everything you've done, or the great adopters that you get pictures and the dog's laying on the couch just chilling with the family, and it's just a great sight, and it makes you keep going because there's a lot of ugly and nonprofit. Not gonna lie,
Yes, there is. I
Yes,
always say
it
I don't
is.
have any tears left. They're gone. I
Yeah,
think they
yeah,
ran
it's
out a
true.
couple of years ago. I got nothing.
Yeah. And I told somebody not too long ago, I go, I can think of a lot of professions. I should have, I considered becoming an attorney, and I'm like, maybe I should have just done that because this is a lot uglier than that, and everybody uses that as the bad or whatever. So it's a crazy world, but every time you see a dog get adopted or every time you see a reuniting, then you go back to, okay, this is why I do it. I do it for them. So yeah.
Keeps you going.
Yeah, it does. And
So,
and that's the other thing I tell people, because I had somebody say, well, you didn't get back to us in time, so we adopted another dog out of a shelter. And I'm like, hey, any adoption is an amazing adoption as far as I'm concerned.
you got somebody agreeing with you there.
Yeah, he's not a working dog. He was one. He was a rescue. He was a rescue. And so, yes, any rescue is a good rescue as far as I'm concerned. So
Definitely.
if you don't get one from us, get one somewhere. Get one
That's
from
right.
some shelter somewhere. So, yeah.
So, just to as a final thing here, for listeners who are interested in helping Mission Canine Rescue, what can we do to support you?
There's several ways. You can go to missioncaninerescue.org and donate. Follow our Facebook page. You can see what we're doing. We're very active on Facebook, and you can see what we're doing a lot of times on there. Adopt or put in an application if you think that you're a home or a good fit and you're ready to commit to one of these incredible working dogs. I promise you it's worth it. I really do. So
Hooked for life at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I'm telling you, we have adopters that are family. And you can look on our page. We'll post if we have in the Houston area a volunteer day, or if we're out in Houston doing something, then we'll put it on our page.
I'll make sure we get those links put up in the show notes
Thank you so
for
much.
this episode. So,
Well, I
Kristen,
really
thank you so
appreciate
much for making the time to be here with me today. I know you're a busy lady and you're always running all over the place.
I appreciate you having us. I mean, we really appreciate it. Mission Canine appreciates it because we're honored to do the work. We get to hang out with these beautiful beasts. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, again, thank you for being here, and everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of Starlight Pet Talk, and please do make sure that you check out the links that we're going to put on the show notes about Mission Canine Rescue. It's an amazing organization doing amazing things for dogs whose lives to date have basically been all about serving us. So please check them out and support them as you can.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Starlight Pet Talk. Be sure to visit our website at www.starlightpettalk.com for more resources, and be sure to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss a show. If you enjoyed and found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate a rating on Apple. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would be great too. Don't forget to tune in next week and every week for a brand new episode of Starlight Pet Talk. And if you don't do anything else this week, give your pets a big hug from us. day